Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. This poetry discussion coming to us from Emily Dickinson, as she is found in Literature, a Portable Anthology, 2nd edition. What a creative title. The poem that we're going to be looking at today is Because I Could Not Stop for Death, which has appeared on the channel at least once before. But I would like to focus on something very specific for this discussion. The poem itself reads as such. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove, at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain, we passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Again, I'd like to focus on one place specifically, one stanza. The second stanza. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. What might that mean for his civility, talking about death when we have to put away our labor and our leisure to hustle, bustle, toil, and trouble? Here comes the humble bee. I invoke the bee because so too did Emily Dickinson from time to time, but how innate in the human condition is the working that we do. It is nearly impossible, I think, to think about a bee and not think about the work that she does. The worker bee is constantly at work. You think about a bee is working. You think about the bee is in the hive. The hive is the job. The hive is civilization for the bee. The hive is everything. Is it possible to think of people without thinking of the things that their work has wrought? If you close your eyes right now and imagine a person, most of us will be imagining a person with clothes on. Clothes are not natural. You will be imagining that person in a building probably, or standing on pavement possibly, or driving a car perhaps. All of these things are human inventions, just as we always imagine a bee at work. We always imagine a bee gathering pollen. We imagine a bee in the hive. You imagine people, when you picture people, in things that people have made. With things that people have made, doing things that people do, not in a state of nature, in a state of work. If you imagine, for example, a dog, anything you imagine about that dog is not something the dog has necessarily worked for. The dog did not make his collar. The dog did not go out and buy the tennis ball that he or she is fetching. The dog exists as dogs will exist, not working towards something like bees or people. Where does a worker bee live her life? A worker bee lives her life between honey and flowers. But all she's ever doing is working. When you ask people, what are some nice things? What are things we might buy someone for something such as Valentine's Day? flowers and sweets. Honey-flavored sweets, perhaps, but sweets. But we spend our whole lives working. This is certainly something which I am guilty of. I get lost in work. So while we might live our lives at work, we certainly live our lives between things which might be enjoyed more, such as the bee, just like the bee does. And I know that because I could not stop for death has nothing inherently to do with bees, but I think it's an image that is often invoked when talking about busy as a bee. How's that? Busy as a bee. Because I could not stop for death, I was simply too busy, like a bee, to stop for death. But death stopped for me. This whole poem is positioned as such, and is positioned in a way that does not give a vantage point to the realization of mortality. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality, meaning everything's already gone. Everything that might be taken has been taken by the point that this poem starts. And even then, we're simply too busy humaning to realize that. We're simply too busy thinking about, noticing those human things such as the school and a house which seemed a swelling of the ground, to deal with our own mortality. To realize that even if it is all for naught, we might as well enjoy those sweets while we've got them. We might as well take some time with the flowers, with the honey, whatever those things are for us as individuals. And work, no matter how alluring, no matter how much it seems to be necessary to tomorrow being fruitful, if we live our whole lives working, the fruit may never be enjoyed. It might constantly just be out there as a promise until we're looking back at a roof that seems to be a cornice in the ground, scarcely visible. Or seems to be a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. Certainly this is something that I've got to work on in my life. Enjoying things a little bit more, and finding a way to make enjoyable things enjoyable as opposed to work. And realizing that I don't have to work towards some of the nicer things in life. Because, and this is what's making me think of this right now, what made me sort of tender to this poem at the moment, is that I'm getting older. A lot of the things that I used to be able to do, not really coming that easily anymore. So that final stanza, since then to centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day, I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. I really don't want to get to the point in life where I have had my head so far buried in work that I realize it's all over. I'm done. There's no more harvest to be had, which is that's always a risk, right? You could wake up tomorrow, and I've known two people who died of brain cancer. I think I've mentioned this on the channel before. It's something that worries me. You know, you see something like that, and what to my experiences, not that I've been the one suffering from it, but to my experiences, what that means, having brain cancer, is that you're living your life, and all of a sudden something gets weird. And then you get it checked out, and you've only got a few months. That's it. That's it. And that could be anything. That wouldn't have to be brain cancer. That could be anything. And what are the things that stand in your way of having lived a full life? For me, it's work. For me, it is this inherent need, this inherent drive towards something. But away from what? Away from those sweeter things. So that is all I've got really for this discussion of Because I Could Not Stop for Death. I just wanted to depress you a little bit, bring you down, maybe ruin your day if I'm lucky. So yeah, hit the like button if you were thoroughly depressed by this. Consider subscribing if you'd like to be depressed in the future. And if you'd like to help us depress you more in days after that, there is a link to our Patreon, as always, to be found in the description below.